You all, CMS Crows family. Tonight's first episode of A Look Back with Luce is designed to achieve two goals. Firstly, to encourage and bring back the good old Thursday night footy, where our youngsters are born into and learn how good footy clubs work, where the modern day footballers ponder on what they did or didn't do on the Saturday, and the players of the latter year continue to get better. Secondly, to allow us an excellent forum to reflect on our short but successful history at the CMS Crows, but also remember and respect the rich and meaningful history of our clubs of origin, Curramulka, Minlaton and Stansbury. It now gives me great pleasure to hand over to the host of our show, Lucy Short, and our special guest for the night, Greg Germein, for the first episode of A Look Back with Luce.
Can you hear me?
No? She's going flat already.
Now?
Yes.
Beauty. Firstly, thanks Greg for being our first guest. You're our guinea pig, but hopefully all goes well. So you've had a long association with footy. In fact, it goes all the way back to 1948.
Yeah. There's an old photo up there that was taken in Minlaton's 48 premiership side, and I was 1 year old, but I happened to be in it. And my father probably couldn't be bothered getting into the togs, so he was just there in civvies and nursing me in front of the old Minlaton change room. So my history does go back a good way.
And as a youngster, there weren't the opportunities to play that there are now, were there?
No, travelling was probably a lot less done then than it is now. I mean, if you lived out on a farm, you went to school but straight home, and I only had Rich and Tim Germein coming up a fair bit younger than me, so I remember jump the fence and go over to Litzter's place, and Dean and Neville were very un-football, and I used to chase them around with a footy wanting a kick, and Dean would do a toey off under the trees and then disappear while I was chasing the ball. But I was very keen, I must say, and then probably the only way that I could get a game was to organise kids at school on a Friday afternoon to go out in the golf course. We made an oval and all the rest, and so my organising days probably were formed way back then, I think, and I used to give people the shits, I suppose, chasing them, but I was very, very keen.
You also played a stint at West Torren in town?
Yeah, just went to school in Adelaide at Findon High for 1 year, and played underage for Torrens juniors and senior colts just in that 1 year, and then came back here.
You were somewhat of a lucky charm for Minlaton. Once you came home from school, you played in Minlaton's first premiership since that 1948 premiership when you were just 1 year old.
I think Minlaton was a lucky charm for me, really, because they'd been through a long period of drought, and then, similar to what happens in lots of country towns, you have a run of local talent that just matures at the one time, and I happened to be in on the ground floor of that, and so we won 3 on the trot then, premierships, and it gets you to the feeling that you want more, I guess. But just incidentally on that, we're having the 50-year reunion of the 65 premiership side coming up this year, and there's more than we thought that have survived that period. In fact, just diverting a little bit, when I pulled up tonight and was watching training here, I remember one night my car was out on the cricket pitch minus a rotor, and this was about 10 o'clock at night, and I was pretty keen to get home, but the Vince brothers didn't think I should be, so
how did it feel to win that first premiership?
In 65, I think it's just, I can't recall any great emotions because I was pretty young, and all the emotive stuff was done by the older blokes who really knew how to play, and all the rest I just sort of went along and had my eyes open fairly well.
Cigars.
Yeah.
So you took on your first coaching role for Minlaton in the 70s. How did that come about?
It came about by default. I'd expressed interest in coaching, and Rex McMahon was appointed coach that year, and he moved off to Murray Bridge right at the beginning of the year, and so by default they grabbed the only other applicant, and that was me, and we had a good run then too. So.
Were there any particular mentors or any advice that you were given that really sticks out?
There were certainly mentors all through, and we'll... Yeah, I've had my ear bent by experts over the years, I suppose. There's perhaps something we'll touch on a bit later with Karamulka, but when I was a very little fellow, we used to live in the main street of Minlaton where the chemist shop is now, and Peter Tilbrook, who was an uncle of mine, while he was still courting, I think, it was certainly before Scooter was about, he lived with us for a year, and he was Uncle Peter to me, and he used to play stuff with me a lot, and I think he was a mentor of my very early years, and it was also just another, I think it was one of several reasons that I went to Karamulka later.
So you experienced instant success once you took on the coaching role at Minlaton. You won the premiership that very year. Were you expecting that?
No, but you hope. I think everybody that's coached, you enter on these things with hope and a bit of belief, and so I really can't answer that. It's a surprise when it actually happens, but you're always optimistic as you look forward to it.
And it started another hot streak for Minlaton, didn't it? It was 3 in a row.
Yeah.
What were your highlights of that, and what do you remember from those grand finals?
Oh, I think it also, it's an example of perhaps how lucky I was over the years, because we had some wonderful talent, again, right for the picking, local guys, and you look at just the ruck division at that time. Newey's here, and he was a very skinny little bloke at that time, but enormous potential as a ruckman. Larry Krieg and Richard Carter, and they all played league footy. So the chances of a local side having that is, you know, that's once in a lifetime, if that, I would say.
While you enjoyed success at Minlaton, you made the decision to move to Curry. Why was that?
Well, partly because of the Tilbrook connection. I also revered the way Karamulka played in their great years with the Hales, Tilbrook, Copley, Secker. You know, they were legends, and they played a Jack Oatey style of football way before we'd seen it here, and so I really idolised them, and I felt that I didn't have anywhere really else to go in Minlaton. You can, once you sort of start heading down and people start sniping at you, not that that happened, but you have to move on, I think. And the other consideration was that my dad had played centre for Karamulka back before he moved to Minlaton. And so he wasn't terrible about it. It really pissed Mum off, I know.
So how did that go down at Minlaton once you announced your decision to move?
Not too good.
really not terribly personally. I could feel knives naturally at times, and I reckon the infamous W.J. McMahon gave my father a hell of a rev in the club one day. It was a challenge, and I think Curry hadn't been up for a few years too, so the excitement that rubbed off from Slim Kemp and the other guys that started training early in summertime, we worked bloody hard to get off to a good start, and that's something we've tried to do ever since then, but that enthusiasm made life worth living too.
I've been told you seem to have a knack for knowing when teams are sort of on the up, and that seemed to be the case as you went to Curry and won another 2 premierships straight away, making that 5 on the trot as a playing coach. What do you remember about those Curry days, particularly those premierships?
They were probably a side ready to roll, I reckon, just needed just a bit of impetus, I suppose. And it also led to comments along those lines that, you're just picking the easy clubs. Why don't you have a go at Stansbury? And and I knew the Jolly boys, and partially knew the Vince brothers. Don Jolly was an influence on me as well. So that's how Stansbury came to pass. But it was a result of a comment that you're picking the easy clubs.
So once you moved to Stansbury, did you experience much success there?
I didn't experience a hell of a lot of success in my personal relationships, I must say. Again, you have some luck in your travels, because early in the piece here we'd started training, and I must say we started a bloody sight more reasonable hour than you do now. I don't know what this 7 o'clock start racket's all about. Anyway, early this first night, we're just sort of getting going, and Tim Vince arrived, and he's going to suss out this new chum coming in, and he was slacking at something awful, and I had a bit of a go at him, and he said, "Oh, I've been shearing, mate." And as luck happened, I'd shorn a few that day, and it just broke the ice, and I feel at that time, had I been offside with Tim, who was a sort of a leader of the place even back then, things could have been quite different. So, you know, that's a little bit of luck you have. You don't think it's important, but I think it was.
So you came full circle. You ended up moving back to Minlaton. Why did you decide to go back there?
Spent some time in Port Augusta, or a season there. That was because I was away shearing, and I sort of longed for home, and came back part of the way through that season, and Minlaton was obviously the place to go, whether they liked me or not. But
did you coach once you got back to Minlaton?
No, I was just playing, and enjoyed that no end, just being able to concentrate on your own game.
You won a male medal in 1980 during this period when you were just playing. Do you think not having the responsibility of coaching while you were out there helped your game?
I think it did. Just the freedom to worry about your own performance, I think, helped. And I suppose you could say that some of the opposition were dropping by the wayside a bit, because at that time Viger had won 6 medals, I think, and Paul Tahini 5, something like that. So they didn't leave much room for anybody else. And as they were probably fading out of it a bit by then. So that all contributed, but I enjoyed playing under Peter Haynes, who was a thinking coach, and yeah, so that probably helped too.
You decided to get back into the coaching side of things though and moved back to Stansbury. Did you feel that you had unfinished business there?
Yeah, I think so, and I kept getting reminded of that by the Stansbury blokes, and Curry were looking invincible at that time too. They, right when I left Curry, there was a group coming along, and your dad was one of them, the 3 Short brothers, and Martin Hales, and a whole lot of really good juniors. The Stones were all coming up, and of course under Dave Pokey and Slim, they took an awful lot of beating, and so I guess we wanted to have a crack at them, and took a while.
But you eventually won a premiership here with Stansbury.
After a draw, we eventually got there, and that draw's still argued about between Chris Vince and I, because he reckoned he gave the ball to me about 30 metres out with plenty of time to just plonk it through the goals. But I reckon the siren went as the ball was in mid-air coming to me, but whatever. We were about a fraction of a kick away from a win that day, but managed to get up the following week. And I think Curry had some injuries too. So, you know, if you look back closely, I've got to admit that there's been some lucky breaks right through.
What were those celebrations like?
Well, you can probably get a pretty good resume from all the Stansbury people here, but I forget how many kegs there were stacked up at Gerald's shearing shed, but it was huge, and Gruzza would be able to enlighten anybody, I suppose, but I think the last premiership Stansbury had won prior to that was under Jack Broadstock.
No, for Jeff Ratley.
Jeff Ratley? Yeah, okay. And did Broadstock play then, or?
I don't think so.
But he had coached the year before?
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Gruz. I'll know.
I'm sorry, the kegs that came to Stansbury that night, the furthest one away came from Nil. As soon as Joe Travis heard we were likely to win, the keg went in the boot and the car came to Stansbury and he rolled up at 10 o'clock.
Very good.
So how much longer did you play then before you decided to retire?
I can't remember, but till I was about 40, I think, and I was 37 then, so yeah, another 3 years, we'll say.
Yeah. So once your playing career was over, you still had a few more coaching jobs to do. In 1994, once the SYP clubs amalgamated and became the Southern Eagles and the Crows, it was the 95 season you were talked into coaching the Eagles, is that right?
Yeah. I had no intention of doing that, but those of you who know Sparks Harris and Bob Warren, they're a very infectious pair of people, and Sparks asked me down to discuss it, the possibility, and we drank a fair bit of beer, and I remember walking out of his place late that night shaking hands, and I was coaching the Eagles.
And you experienced success with the Eagles?
Yeah, well, Henry's still here. I put a bit of work in on Henry because I was pretty keen to get him to play. I'd heard a bit about him and watched him a few times, respected conversations with him, and I was pretty keen to get him to play and called around a couple of times to try and do that. He I reckon he blames the missus for it, but anyway. So while I'm on that, great luck for this year, Henry. I reckon you're just the man for the job, and I wish you all the best. Yeah. So where were we? Eagles. Yeah. Again, great recruiting by Bob Warren and Sparks. There weren't a lot of ring-ins, shall we say, but they made sure the Reuter boys, who were locals, Darren Holland, who was a local, all came back, and it made it a pretty good side. Mind you, it needed to be, because Wallaroo, Jesus, they were good in those times. And to actually knock them off on the Minlaton Oval was a huge thrill. But having finished all that, I really don't have much to do with the Eagles anymore. It's just, I don't know.
And then your final coaching role was in '99. You were talked into coaching the CMS Crows. How did that come about?
Bob Warren again, I've mentioned him a few times, but he said you really always need somewhere to call home, because I'd been a bit of a nomad, obviously. You need somewhere to call home, and I reckon I was on the phone one day to him out on the Yorktown Road, and Harold Litster pulled into their driveway in the truck with this beaming big smile that we know from Harold. And at that moment I just thought, yeah, well, this is home, and embarked on that. And again, it took us, I think, 3 attempts before